A lot of people are going to disagree with this, but ranking new movies that released in June from worst to best. In last place is easily the Netflix original movie named Trigger Warning. The stars Jessica Alba, and that's essentially the only positive thing I can say about this movie. Everything else is just a complete disaster around this film. I swear it feels like we're getting one of these just super generic action movies with a pretty big name star in it like once a month from Netflix nowadays, and they're all just so unbelievably lazy and generic, trying to appeal to the mass audiences. Like, we know Netflix just uses algorithms to decide what type of movies they make, and this is definitely one of those just algorithm movies probably written with the help of ChatGPT, because it is so unbelievably just boring and generic. By the time you get to the end of this movie, you're just so uninvested in the story going on. Any different plot twists or developments you don't even care about. Jessica Alba tries her best to save this movie, but I'm sorry, it's too bad for even her to save it, and it's very bad. At number 8, I have Ultraman Rising. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a massive jump up in quality from Trigger Warning, but I still didn't really just jive with this as much as many other people did. It's about this guy that is Ultraman, but he also is a regular person that is a professional baseball player, and he ends up caring for this like baby kaiju monster. It's a very cutesy, kind of low stakes, heartwarming movie. If you're into that kind of thing, you'll probably love this. I'm honestly just not the biggest fan of those types of stories. It was just kind of okay to me. I am also not the biggest fan of this 3D animation style. Like, I think the character models themselves look pretty terrible in this style, but otherwise the animation I actually did enjoy for the style, and some of the fights towards the end are really good visually. At number 7, I have Yorgos Lanthimos' Kinds of Kindness, one of the biggest disappointments of the year for me, because I do like a lot of his other work, but this one is honestly one of his weakest movies in my opinion. The movie is kind of broken up into 3 different sections that are completely different stories that have very similar themes in it, and it's like the same actors like Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons are in all the stories playing different characters. The first 2 of these stories were actually very enjoyable, especially the first one. Jesse Plemons is just putting on an acting masterclass like he always does, and I honestly wish either of those were just turned into a full-length film, or it was just those 2 stories and this was like maybe a nice 2 hours. But nope, we spend the last 40 minutes with the third one named RMF Eats a Sandwich, and it is absolutely unbearable to get through in my opinion, because Yorgos always has a lot of dark humor and dark moments in it and goes for those kind of shock value things. There's always something deeper being said or a meaning behind it that kind of balances it out. But the third story in this movie forgets to add any substance, and it's just shocking and grotesque for the sake of being shocking and grotesque. It really doesn't work for me. There's one of the worst SA scenes I've ever seen in my life from the self-proclaimed feminist. At number 6, I have A Quiet Place Day 1. This is a prequel to the previous 2 Quiet Place movies. That's about how this all started, but the biggest issue I have with this movie is that it kind of skips over the actual day 1 events. There's maybe 20 minutes before the invasion initially happens, and then we get a little bit of the chaos when everybody's just running around in New York City. It's like, oh my god, the aliens are here, and then we immediately skip over it. Everybody immediately learns, oh, we just have to be quiet, and it turns into a regular A Quiet Place movie. I will also say this movie is billed as an obviously horror thriller, just like the first 2, but in my opinion, it's not really scary or that intense, especially when compared to the first 2 movies. Though those both had at least one scene where I was like, oh my god, that was super intense. This movie really did not have that outside of some of the scenes with the cat. But what it lacks for in all those things I just complained about, it makes up for with our main 2 characters played by Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, because they are absolutely incredible. Their chemistry together is better than I could have ever expected, and they genuinely share some incredibly just heartwarming moments towards the end of this movie that were the biggest takeaway for me. And because the connection between our 2 main characters is so strong, it really makes the ending just super impactful, and it's a very solid time at the movies, but far from a masterpiece. At number 5, I have The Bike Riders, of a movie essentially just following how this one biker gang just evolves and develops over time, and you're kind of just hanging out with these characters and watching the things happening. There's not really a lot going on in this movie, but I kind of enjoy those kind of just you're hanging out with them movies. I did not like this movie as much as I expected to. I see a lot of people really praising it. I wish I got that out of it, but there are a lot of moments I really enjoy, mostly with Tom Hardy's character and just his performance. He reminded me he is just such an incredible actor that I really want to see in more big roles. At number 4, I have Bad Boys Ride or Die. I was not a fan of Bad Boys 2 or 3. I know it's kind of blasphemous to say. People love 2, but I was not the biggest fan of it. I always think the first one is the best, but now I think this is easily the second best Bad Boys film. I had an absolute blast with this movie. Will Smith and Martin Lawrence's chemistry is just as good as it was like 20 years ago. They are absolutely hilarious together in this movie, especially Martin Lawrence. He was having me laughing with like pretty much every line he says in this movie. He is so unbelievably funny. Also, I'm glad we kind of scaled this movie back down. We're just taking place just in Miami. That's where I want my bad boys to be. A lot of the action was also surprisingly entertaining, and I feel like the directors got really comfortable with these world and this characters, and they were allowed to do some really creative things with the camera work. There's some really fun shots in this. At number 3 is one of my biggest surprises of the year. It's Thelma, which is essentially an action movie following this grandma riding around on this scooter trying to chase down the guys that scammed her out of $10,000. If you're one of the people that's out there saying, oh, we never get original movies in Hollywood nowadays, definitely go check this out. I guarantee you've never seen anything like it in your life. It's super funny all throughout. In addition to that, it's also really heartwarming and endearing, and anybody that currently is or has dealt with aging grandparents and the struggles that comes with that, and just, you know, them getting older naturally, a lot lot of these things are going to happen, like falling for scams like she does in this movie and having to deal with that. There's a lot you can take away from this movie to connect to your own personal experiences. That's what I was doing, at least in this film, and it's really just a great time. I'd really appreciate it if you like this video real quick, but at number 2, I have Inside Out 2. The longer I think about it, the more I think I might actually like this better than the first Inside Out. It is genuinely an amazing film, and it's pretty much all thanks to our new emotions. Obviously, Anxiety is the star of the show. I think she is both incredible as a character, but also one of the best and most realistic portrayals of how anxiety actually works and affects people, and it's really going to be an important movie going forward for kids to watch this. Embarrassment was another one of the new characters that I absolutely adored, and I think he has some amazing moments in this movie. I also just loved how much time we got to spend with Riley outside of her head, seeing how the emotions really affect her. A lot of the hockey stuff was really well done in my opinion. I also think this movie is way funnier than the first Inside Out movie. Like, anger and disgust were having me laughing all throughout this entire thing. Like, there was never more than 5 minutes I went without laughing, but it still manages to have a very emotional and impactful ending, even if it's not as strong emotionally as the first one. But at number 1 for me, it is Hitman. This checks all the boxes I wanted, and it's one of my favorite rom-coms of the last couple of years because Glenn Powell is an absolute superstar, and his chemistry with Adria Arjona is absolutely amazing. I'm sure I butchered her name though. It's a very charming film, and they know the exact story that they want to tell. You get in, you get out, there's no fluff. This is just a straight A to B movie, but I really appreciate that sometimes. A lot of people I know are saying this movie is really overrated. It really just depends on how you feel about the humor in this film. I'm a huge fan of Richard Linklater and his other films and his style, so I really loved it. Let me know what your top 3 is in the comments below.